Welcome to the DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon. My name is Pamela Quan and I'm the executive director. Audiences as a whole are pretty smart and savvy. There's so much content out there that oftentimes viewers have everything pegged within the first few minutes of watching a movie. And then they settle in for a pretty predictable, comfortable ride. That is far from the case with the next film that we're about to discuss. The feature narrative Silent River is completely unpredictable, defies genres, creates suspense to the nth degree, and is a cinematic experience. I'm of the opinion that the filmmaker's brain is from another dimension. We're about to spend some time with him, and you can decide for yourself. We have the cast and crew of Silent River with us today. They are all extremely accomplished in their own right. I'm pleased to introduce the writer, director, and producer, Chris Chan Lee. Producer and lead actor, West Liang. Lead actor, Amy Tsang. And director of photography, Norbert Shieh. Hey, I could not wait for this day to come so I could chat with all of you about this film. Chris, you received a lot of accolades for your 1997 film, Yellow, which is a film that tells stories about specific Asian American experiences. Can you give us a summary about Yellow?
Yeah, Pamela, first of all, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be a part of this year's DisOrient Film Festival. So thank you so much for bringing us into the fold. And yeah, I started out quite a while ago as a filmmaker, and I came of age during the '80s, when there was like a big explosion in American youth pop culture with the advent of cable TV and MTV, and then all those seminal kind of youth-driven films like John Hughes movies, right? But certainly, so I was totally into all that, but there was like a dearth of Asian American representation in all of that kind of content. And so when I was starting out early in my career, I was really driven to make films that had Asian American kids like front and center. So Yellow was an ensemble piece about Asian American teens that were having a kind of a pivotal graduation night from high school. And it was an attempt to illustrate, an array of characters in ways that we haven't seen before, and yet, give it that pop culture punch with like the John Hughes kind of flavor, as well as we brought in, the whole soundtrack was comprised of, I think, like 13 different Asian American bands and groups and artists. It was all Asian American driven music. So it was kind of a real fun collaborative in that regard.
And this was a cutting edge move, was it not? I mean, it was so unconventional for the time.
Yeah, at the time, we were getting a lot of feedback from experts in the industry and stuff like that about, well, you should cast some non-Asian characters in the leads, and I was even told literally, like, no one's going to come see this movie about Asian American kids. Like, there's no interest in that, But I knew, like, I really wanted to see that film, and that it was something that would be, relatively fresh at the time, and we did pretty well on the festival circuit.
Yes, you did.
And we had a commercial theatrical run that spanned, I think, like 9 cities. So it was like a limited theatrical in various parts of the United States. But we had a 5-week run in LA, and it was like very successful for a film that did not get a lot of mainstream coverage.
Exactly. And then we fast forward to today. Silent River doesn't fit in one genre, and it's very different from Yellow. Also unconventional.
Right. So, I mean, being collaborators, we have a tendency to do things that are not really expected or appropriate at that exact time. So we're trying to be forward-looking. Hopefully that's what we're doing. And this is a film that I think is sort of an anomaly, right? Like, it's not it's not an immigrant story. It's not an identity-driven film, um, but it is being produced by a team of Asian Americans and people of color, and no matter what anyone says, like how Asian is it or whatever, we are informing it with our life experiences and our backgrounds and histories. Like that's a part of who we are as people and artists, right? And
Exactly.
and I think we kind of are hoping that we're going to push the boundaries with this film in terms of what is expected or accepted from Asian American content creators.
Well said. You clearly didn't set out to make what everyone else was making. You wrote with the intention of creating art that the kind of art that you love. Is that correct? Tell us about your concept.
Yeah, an influence I often refer to when talking about this film is David Lynch, because
Mhm.
I think he helps capture in a very quick and brief way uh, the personal style of filmmaking and the sort of surrealism, the dreamlike landscape that we're attempting to create using the constructs of cinema. But there are a lot of other influence as well. One I guess there's like the structuralist film movement back in the 60s and 70s, referring to like Chantal Ackerman and John Dielman, her famous film, where the environment and behavior and the artifacts of daily life all kind of give us a physical, they physicalize the internal human experience and the way that people relate and behave and everything. And so our script, on one level, because most of us are based here in LA, which is basically Hollywood, right? I think for many third parties, it might have been a tough read, because when you start reading the script, it's like this guy checking into a hotel. He's kind of futzing around and doing stuff, and it escalates from there. But like the structuralist film movement, which basically I think probably heavily influenced and informed somebody like David Lynch, right? It makes those things like very important, in terms of how those small behaviors capture what people are going through and how they relate to others. And that's something that Liang, our lead actor, really dove into. Like he never really questioned, like, well, where's the jumping off point, or where's the big moment, like we'd expect in Hollywood. Like he understood that behavior was really critical in illustrating the character.
Oh, I see. Well, Silent River is special on so many levels. It has great writing and direction, thanks to you, fabulous performances. It's a visual experience, of that film is stunning. And you had rich music and sound. Let's talk about the performances. West, I was just kind of curious, had you worked with Chris before, and how did you come to collaborate on this project?
Hi, thank you so much for having us, Pamela.
Sure.
First of all, well, the story that I like to tell people is that I was really stalking Chris, and that's the half truth. In reality, my first short film that I ever did premiered at the same festival as Yellow back in
Mm.
the '90s, but I was so green that I was really unaware of the kind of like impact that movie would make. I just was really filled with affection that I wanted to be part of what was happening in that world that he was creating. But it wasn't until I grew as an actor that I really got to know the industry, got to know the amazing impact that film has made. And when I moved to LA, it's such a small community here in this town, especially among Asian American artists, that we just started running into each other at events, and we ultimately became, acquaintances and then friends. And then through many conversations over, drinks and food, we started discussing the possibility of finding something that we can work on together. And that conversation kind of grew over, intermittently over years. And then we got closer and closer and closer. And I think the more we found trust between ourselves and found interest, the conversation kind of heated up. And then we arrived at the possibility of this story that we wanted to just do with very little funding, but with kind of all guns blazing, meaning Chris was really committed to the idea that we're just going to make a film no matter what. Even he actually said to me, even if it's going to end up between me and you holding the camera, holding the boom, we're going to do it. And so it was really that kind of emboldened energy and commitment that got me excited, you know. And I have to say, there were many times where I was talking myself off the ledge, talking him off the ledge, because when you're trying to find money, when you're trying to find, resources, you get scared of what you might not be able to achieve. But I think we really relied on each other. Moments where we would text and be like, "Hey, can we do this? What about this?" So from those conversations, that's kind of how we gave birth to the concept of the story, the characters. There's a lot of back and forth about, during these interviews, we talk a lot about what the film has become to ourselves, meaning its similarities to a lot of the greats that we admire, Lynch, Kubrick, Wong Kar-wai, and all these things. But in the beginning of the journey, it wasn't so linear. There was a lot of our hearts leading, that walk, but at the same time, there was a lot of discussion about, is this not solid enough, the narrative? Do we need, that there? Do we need multiple cameras? Can we do this? And then we, with more people added on the team, with Norbert, we got to location with amazing actors. It really started having its own kind of heart once everybody started finding their instrument and playing. And for me, I have to say, once I took my producer hat off and really started wearing my actor's shoes, I would say about 4 weeks before we started shooting, that was when I was really, really, really able to see the brilliance of what Chris was trying to create. And that was when I said, okay, he's really going to give all of us the ability to be bold, the ability to experiment. In the real world, you can't do that. If you do an episode of network TV, you're going to say this line, you're going to do that, you're going to do that, and it's going to be, it's going to be over in an hour. But once I realized the possibility of this story and the way that we were going to tell it, I think that allowed me to kind of really swing for the fences in my performance as an actor, and I have to say, obviously thanks to Chris, Norbert, and everybody involved, but it's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of in terms of what we were able to create all together, so I'm really, really excited that we get to share this with your audience.
Oh, great. And by the way, I saw you in the Netflix series, Atypical. Great job in a comedic role.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun on that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. My daughters and I binge watched that. That was our mother-daughter thing. And it makes me wonder, as an actor, are you drawn to quirky scripts?
It's so hard because as an actor, when you're struggling for roles, you're kind of just told never to say no. You got to see the possibility of every yes and just jump into it. You get lucky, like Atypical. I was very lucky with that. I had someone stop me on the street crying about the impact of that episode. And so you really get to see, those performances. I got lucky with that. I got lucky with this. But what I really love about this film is really and this answer really speaks maybe to the audience. The idea for me is that here's a character who's struggling with issues that are kind of impacting people across a wide, section of life. And it's not necessarily just about the otherness of his ethnicity, but the otherness of his experience. And I enjoy that. So yeah, for me, if the quirkiness is coming from the ability to really find those nuances, then yeah.
Okay, great. There were many scenes where it was just you. You had no one else to play off of. Did you have to do a lot of takes to get the emotion right that you wanted for Elliot, your character?
This is something I never asked Chris, but but, but I don't know whether he or Norbert were annoyed because I I was in full experiential mode. As soon as he called action, I was in the idea that I don't know what's going to happen and I don't know how things are going to go. I don't know how long I'm going to hold the phone. I don't know when I'm going to turn my head. And, and that's kind of my obligation as an actor. I got to push the boundaries and up to the director to kind of box me in. But he never really slapped that hand. He was very much allowing things to happen. So yeah, it's a really collaborative process with everybody in terms of those scenes.
Great. Well, the contrast of Elliot and Greta was really interesting. Elliot is this open book, while we spend the entire film trying to figure out Greta. Amy, let's talk about Greta. I thoroughly enjoyed watching you in this film. Greta is calm and composed, yet full of mystery. You played her so well and you made it look easy, but was this character challenging for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was very challenging for me. I guess because Chris trusted me with this role, and he was just so generous in offering me a backstory of what the character went through, and we just kind of like collaborated and came up with this character together. And I didn't let myself like overdo anything. I was just in the moment by moment, and whatever came up. And if something wasn't there, I didn't try to push it. So I just feel like her as a character, she would conceal a lot of her emotions because she's on a journey to do something, and it's a very dangerous mission, and like the focus was that. So every moment I guess I was just thinking those thoughts of how I needed to do what I needed to do while I was there in that hotel. So yeah.
Really interesting. And, West alluded to this earlier, but I was thinking with such a small cast, you must have all, developed a lot of trust. And, West did talk about that. It's also that much more pressure on fewer people. So what was it like on set?
Wow. I learned so much on this set. It was a tight ship. Everybody was so collaborative, so down though, like to do it. Everybody on board was gung-ho about it from the very beginning, like super, like love the script, love the project, and was just so helpful. Everyone just wore so many hats. And so it made it, even though we had very limited time to do the scenes, and every day was just, we were running overtime every day because of the energy on set from everyone wanting to be there, being just so helpful and collaborative with everything. It was smooth, to be honest.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, that's great to hear. And you do feel that. I mean, you really do feel that. Some might not know that you are also a costume designer. So did you bring any of that expertise to Silent River?
This is my first film being a costume designer. And again, I'm very grateful that Chris put that trust in me. Not having any previous experience, I was so excited to do it. I collect vintage clothing, and I had a lot of clothes in my closet, but also I source a lot of stuff from like different thrift shops and everything. So it was kind of perfect for this project because we didn't a limited budget. And
Right.
yeah, so we were able to, pull things together.
Right. Well, and it added another layer to, building those characters. So well done.
Thank you.
I should also mention that Max Faugno delivered a strong performance as P2, and he brought it. So I wanted to say that. And you guys had some great scenes together.
Yeah, I loved working with Max.
Yeah, thank you. One of the elements that makes you take notice of Silent River is the entire look of the film. So that brings us to Norbert. You incorporated numerous reflections in glass, water, mirrors, metal. You also had projections and haze. They were all very cool and subtle effects, and they enhanced the feeling of suspense in the story. What were your conversations like with Chris when you were mapping out the visual elements of this film?
Thanks, Pamela, for your question.
Sure.
Yeah, so for our initial discussions, we're just comparing just influences and kind of stuff that excited us as filmmakers and what we're drawn to. And then we were, then what I'd like to do is just jump away from filmmakers and just look at stuff visually. So looking at artists, looking at other photographers and trying to ground, what in reality. It's really tough for like indie films to look up to larger big budget films because that's just not a fair comparison. We can't be like a Ridley Scott film. So we were just trying to figure out how can we make it our voice. And so we looked at a lot of photographers, some people like Todd Hito, Nan Golden, just like we wanted the space itself, like the hotel, to be our character. And so in many ways, it was trying to tell the story of Elliot and Greta meeting at this hotel and imbuing that hotel as a space that could enrich the story and also illustrate the journey that Wes's character goes through. And so a lot of that was how can we instill mood? How can we instill different ways of projecting Elliot's mental space into the physical space of the hotel? So a lot of exploration and also a lot of just drawing from artistic influences.
Very nice. Did you enjoy the challenge of shooting in such confined spaces for the indoor scenes? You chose some interesting camera angles. So can you talk about shooting in confined spaces and what you bring to the table?
Yeah, so a lot of when you're stuck in a room for like maybe 30% of a script, you're, as a cinematographer, you're always looking for different ways to look at it differently. And I think for us, it was always trying to find various angles that could instill additional storytelling. Like how is this going to give you more value for what the shot is? It's not just, a shot isn't just a shot. It's not supposed to just show the plot. It's supposed to kind of reveal elements of what's going on for Elliot's character. And the challenge for us was time, of course, and how do we imbue storytelling and time and also be creative. So a lot of the ways we were looking at it was through the experience of all these things combined in long takes. So, the film does have a really outlandish long single take, and we did try to experiment with ways of just instilling storytelling in as much as we could in one shot. So
Right. Yeah, you did it. You did it amazingly. And what about shooting in the expansive outdoor scenes in the desert? Can you tell us a little about that, setting up for that? And
yeah, the desert's always a challenge because you're working to the whims of nature. And so we talk about the story often about how on one of our last days of shooting, and in one of these vista shots that we had towards the end where Elliot's running towards the camera and the clouds are all, it's like golden hour, the clouds are completely clear. It was raining that day before. And so, or like that same day, yeah, like it was probably in the last hour, it just stopped raining. And so the sky opened up and all of a sudden it was this beautiful orange glow. So a lot of that is just going in and trying to be adaptive to what's your surroundings. And a lot of the shooting of the film was, you know, we had plans, we had lots of plans, but then as soon as we were on set, it was just like, let's adapt, you know, like how can we, once we're there, we see the blocking by like West or Amy and see how they respond to the location and respond to the mood and how it's lit. Like once those things start coming into play, we could actually get way more, you know, stuff out of these things. And also having an eye, you know, like Chris has an amazing eye of seeing those things happen. And he would just be like, okay, shoot that, or let's get this, or keep rolling. So like those are always things to be very keen on just keeping our eyes open for.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I would, you know, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the music. Brilliant. There were parts that were eerie and foreboding, and, you know, parts that got my heart racing when it needed to. But, you know, there were also some sad sections and these, how do I describe it? Alien, ominous sections. What notes, Chris, did you give to the composer, Brian Ralston, to create the music for Silent River?
We had some discussions about the aesthetic, but most importantly, I mean, Brian Ralston really took a very active role as composer of the film and really brought a lot of sort of vision to his execution of the score. He basically plays like an unseen, omniscient character in the film. A lot of times supporting what the characters played by Wes and Amy and Max, Dakota, Chandra, Cindy, what they're doing to support the scenes to help give it clarity. But oftentimes the score would be counterpoint and it would contradict what we were witnessing, right? So it was definitely like a presence in the room that had a very strong interpretive force. What he did in terms of, you know, the craft of his work was, you know, he used a lot of electronic instrumentation, which is common these days, but he also used a lot of unusual instruments, like actual acoustic and percussive instruments. Like we had a pianotron that Brian and West and I went to go record out in the valley, and it was basically like this really aged, stripped down guts of a piano that was in a specialty instrument warehouse, and Brian was making up all kinds of sounds with that he was sampling and using in the recording. So that way, taking that strategy, he was able to really create this otherworldly experience, in addition to using more conventional instruments like the trumpet and cello and viola and those kinds of things. But he also used some really weird stuff that helped us create this surreal landscape.
It was very cool. And I mean, I think it stayed in minor key for all, if not most of the film, which it created the desired effect. And, you know, I think I heard a little bit of major maybe in the piano in the credits at the end, and it felt like a soft resolution. It was beautiful. It sounded like you had many more musicians. You know, like I look at the credits, I'm like, that's it? You know, like your musical team, it was brilliant what you pulled out of the resources that you had.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you to Brian, because he basically produced the score, and he did strategically bring in other live musicians. I mean, he's a very capable musician himself,
Yes.
and he did some of the instrumentation, but we couldn't afford like a full orchestra, so he had
It sounded like you had it.
yeah, he had to really strategize. Like, we don't want this to sound like the score's made from a computer, right?
Yeah.
So he brought in some really gifted, working, like very well established Hollywood musicians, and to strategically perform certain parts to bring in that kind of human interpretation.
Right. I was happy to see you have a piece from Go Nakamura. He's so talented. So yeah. Kudos.
That track, I'm sorry, but that track was like really hard to source, you know. It's like one of the only piece of source music in the movie, and we were trying out lots of stuff, lots of great music that just didn't fit the scene. And then I've always been a fan of Go and have heard lots of his work, watched them on movies and stuff like that. And I stumbled onto that track, and we finally found something that fit in this kind of big scene with Elliot, and he was very generous to let us use the song. You know?
Yeah, well, great. That's awesome. And also kudos to your attention to sound. I mean, you put a lot of effort into making sure the sound was excellent. I think many indie filmmakers don't have that luxury. You know, you have to make sacrifices somewhere, and you did not compromise with sound.
Yeah, we were
Yeah,
lucky. Eric Jolly was our sound supervisor and re-recording mixer, played many lead roles in this post-sound department. I was fortunate to have worked with him on several projects in post-production on, throughout the years. And, it was a great gift to us that he came on board, because he's sound designed literally hundreds of films throughout like a 45-year career. So Eric really knows the stuff, and brought a lot of interpretation to the film. It's we hope that people see it in the theater, like, eventually, as things kind of cool down with what our whole world is going through, we want to also be able to have people see it in the theater, have people see it in a really good VOD environment, because it's a 5:1 surround mix.
well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to hear, I'm really kind of curious. I want to go around and hear from all of you. What is one scene that was really, I'm sure there were many, but what is one scene that was really super gratifying to you to be a part of? And I'm going to start with Norbert.
I'll do. There's quite a few scenes, but I think mine is you see it at the end, and it's also interspliced throughout the film, and it's just this long take from the hotel room looking outside of Elliot's character on the phone. And then it's just like, that scene was a mixture of all these things, of circumstance, of having this perfect like golden hour setting, and also just the drama of the scene of being so far away at a very intense emotional moment for Wes, and then the juxtaposition of being slammed right into seeing this happen. That was very gratifying for me.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to look at that again.
that's actually a really good one. I mean, it does occur early in the film, and it literally closes the movie. And I remember when we had to shoot that, because it wasn't even scheduled for that day, but we realized we didn't have something to shoot at the end of the day, and it was golden hour. And it's like, okay, well, every day was like, let's get this now. If we don't get it today, we may never be able to get it, And I always felt kind of bad about that scene, because we also really put Amy on the spot. She was only supposed to be costume designer that day, and suddenly I'm like, okay, Amy, let's do this scene, and it's like 3 pages of dialogue for her, But fortunately, it all worked out, and West really went for it. We were shooting literally as the sun was going down. It was done so quickly, but I don't even know when we could have shot it if we didn't shoot it that day.
So would you say that's one of your most gratifying scenes too?
There are a lot of really good moments, and don't get me wrong, it was a tough shoot. We weren't all standing around in our berets and twirling our mustaches and being artists. Like every day felt like we were at war, and we were chasing the sun. But there was another really good one. I'll try to keep it quick, but it's kind of later on in the movie without giving spoilers. But 3 of our lead actors come into the room. It's an interior shot in the hotel, and it's nighttime. We can tell it's nighttime through the window. And then there's a dolly move from the night room to a daytime room that's adjacent. So we're playing with crazy sort of sense of time, right? From going day to night within the same shot. And despite the shoot being really tough, like that was a very gratifying moment, because it was incredibly challenging. And there were a lot of moving parts with a dolly move, and like the actors like moving furniture in the middle of the shot off camera. But we felt this energy of like everyone having a really great time doing something that felt really challenging and felt really exciting, and we knew it was going to be a really good moment in the film.
Oh, great. Thank you. Amy. I'm kind of wondering what one of your gratifying scenes is going to be about.
I love that scene that Chris just described too. That was very gratifying for me. But there was a very special scene for me as an actor. The whole the whole story of Greta just, I think, came out in that one scene, which was the bathtub scene. And I felt that it was such a beautiful scene that Chris wrote. And as an actor, I just thought that was just so fun to play. That was my favorite. Yeah.
That's great. And West, let's hear from you.
You know, when everybody was answering, I was like, oh my God, my memory is so complicated with everything, you know. Mostly because there's so many scenes that I absolutely love, and I had such a great time on set as an actor. It was such a gift to be able to play and experience. And I'll give you two examples, and then I'll shut up. They have really specific reasons. The first one I'll give is pretty much the first time Elliot goes into this hotel. And the reason I want to say that scene is because that, I might be wrong, but that might be the first scene that we ever shot in the entire movie. No, you know what? The first scene was me crossing. The first interior shot of the movie that we shot was the first time Elliot goes into the hotel room. And the reason why I enjoyed that scene was because that was the first time very early in the process where I was able to feel how the other musicians, if you will, in the room were playing. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how that room was going to be set up. I didn't know how Elliot was going to experience that room. And I was fully immersed in experiencing everything. And Chris and Norbert never rushed. They just were quiet. And I was just so in the world that I wasn't even on set. I was experiencing everything. And every time I watch that scene, I'm filled with so much joy because they allowed me to bring Elliot to life for the first time in that way. And that kind of set the tone for all of us in terms of how we were going to capture this world. It was very much fly on the wall, right? And I loved it because it kind of set it up for me. And the second scene I'll say is the scene that Amy brought up, is the bathtub scene. And I'll tell you exactly why. That scene almost didn't change from the first time Chris wrote it to the time that we shot it. It almost didn't see any change. All the other scenes changed very much. That scene almost didn't change at all. So it was perfection from the beginning. Another reason is because it was a closed set. So I wasn't, as the producer and actor in almost every scene, that was probably one of the few scenes that I actually wasn't on set. I was not allowed to be on set because, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but because the actors were, Amy was in a bathtub. And so I didn't get to see that scene shot. I didn't get to see the scene until Chris was editing it, and he invited me into the editing room. And that scene is beautifully shot, is beautifully written, is beautifully performed, it's beautifully directed and scored beautifully. And that scene is a beautiful scene, and it speaks so much about this story. And I think your viewers should watch the movie waiting for that scene to happen. So those are the two really important scenes that I think really, I think set down the markers for what this film was going to be for us.
Wow. Well, you've given us a lot of ideas, to really think back and reflect upon this beautiful film. Congratulations to all of you for making such a wonderful film. Where do you go from here? I'd love to hear about your next projects. We'll start with you, Chris.
Well, right now we have a lot of, efforts cut out for us in bringing Silent River into the world. So that's definitely a big priority. I would love to make another film, hopefully soon. And I hope to be able to work with these people again on a new project. and hopefully under better circumstances with like more resources and a little bit more support, right? Because everybody had to wear so many hats. And I also, I'm glad we got to make this film, because it was kind of like, if we don't make this film now, are we ever going to have a chance to make a movie like this? It was really a way to put our personal stamp on a contemporary movie. But I also, in addition to doing something like this that's personally challenging, gratifying, that really hopefully is fulfilling to cinephiles and film lovers, etc., I also do want to make something that casts a wider net in terms of being more accessible, but still retaining our voice as creators in it. So I have a few things in the works, but I hopefully it's soon. Yeah.
Okay.
It's always better to not even talk about what you're trying to do, actually.
Right. And just show up with it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we will keep in touch. We will look for it. West, what's up with you?
Hopefully, again, I'm so excited to just be able to share this film with people. This film, I think, listen, I really think, and I'm not just saying this because this is our film, but this film really is one of those films that gets better with age and gets better with multiple viewings. I really, really think that your affection and your opinion of this film changes between first viewing and second viewing. It's that kind of a film. It's gourmet food, but for me, in addition to promoting this film, we're working on Silent River sequel. No, I'm kidding. I'm just out hustling as an actor, trying to work to do, and also I'm as well as Chris, I'm also writing and developing other things that I can potentially do in addition to acting. So yeah, and everybody who worked on this project are people that I would be on my immediate call list in terms of being able to collaborate with, because it was that kind of project, not to say there weren't disagreements, but it was all coming from so much affection and love. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Amy, let's hear from you.
I have been writing and developing a screenplay that is based on inspired by my brother and I's relationship. It's called Lady Link, and I'm hoping to direct and act in it. And if you want to know more about that, just follow me on Instagram, theamytsang.com. It will pop up in my feed sometime.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We will follow it. So I'm excited to hear about that. I love sibling relationships. I have 3 sisters and a brother. So, and my parents never let us out of the house. So there's a lot of relationship to be explored there. Yeah. Norbert, how about you? What are next projects for you?
Well, as a DP, I'm always looking to kind of work on other projects. So working on other features, hopefully sometime this year. And then I'm also on the side, also a documentary filmmaker. So I'm working on my own documentary. It's sort of a food documentary that kind of flips the idea of the chef. Instead, it really looks more towards the people that raise and grow an ingredient. So it takes place in Taiwan. The pandemic's kind of put that on hold. So hopefully later down the line this year, I'm able to go back and continue production and just keep working on it as time permits.
Well, that sounds like it has a lot of potential. So what a talented group.
Yeah,
what an amazing, talented group.
I gotta say, I mean, in addition to Amy and West, Norbert's also a director in his own right, and he made the best pandemic short film that I've ever seen. I think it was about 1.5 years ago. I believe there's no dialogue, so it was like a silent experience, but it was also like at times really poignant, at times very lonely and isolated, and it was also hilarious too. So I definitely
all in a short.
Yeah, all in one movie.
What's it called?
It's called Sunset.
Sunset. Yeah. Oh, we'll have to look for that. So thank you for putting that on our radar. So You know, at DisOrient, we're absolutely committed to telling our stories, but we're also committed to showcasing quality works of talented Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander and Asian American filmmakers who excel at their craft and can just tell a great story. You are all, I think, part bold and part crazy to sign on to a project like this, but I really admire your artistry, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Viewers, if you haven't seen the film yet, I urge you to check it out. And I do warn you, like Wes said, it may cast a spell on you to watch it again, and you won't know why, and just go with it. It did that to me, and I think that's the mark of good filmmaking. Please, audiences, rate the film after you watch it, because Silent River is eligible for an Audience Choice Award. Thank you all for joining me today. Chris, West, Amy, and Norbert. It was a blast talking with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, DisOrient.
Thanks very
And
much.
Thanks.
everyone at Pamela, we appreciate it very much.
Thanks.